Dr. Dark One's Scary Stories. Story 1. I've been a rideshare driver for a few years now. It's usually an easy gig. Drive people around, make some cash, and listen to music in between rides. But last Friday night, I picked up a passenger I'll never forget. It was close to midnight, and I was about ready to call it a night. My last request popped up, a pickup from a quiet suburban street. It was one of those neighborhoods where every house looks the same, with perfectly trimmed lawns and barely any lights on. When I arrived, a woman was already standing at the curb. She had on a dark coat, and her hair covered most of her face. I rolled down the window. "You Anna?" I asked, double-checking the app. She nodded without looking at me. "Yeah. Can we go now?" Her voice was low, shaky. Something about her felt off. I should have trusted my gut and canceled the ride, but I didn't want a bad rating. I started driving, and the GPS directed me toward an area I didn't recognize. The streets grew darker, the houses farther apart, and eventually, we were on a stretch of road surrounded by woods. The whole time, Anna sat silently in the back. I tried making small talk. Long night? Work? Or fun? But she didn't respond. She just stared out the window, her face pale in the reflection of the passing streetlights. When we finally reached the destination, it was an old warehouse. No lights, no cars, nothing that screamed drop-off spot. I stopped and turned to her. We're here." She hesitated, then said, "Wait here. I'll be back." Before I could respond, she got out and disappeared into the shadows. I sat there, tapping my fingers on the wheel. Something about this didn't feel right. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I debated driving off, but just as I reached for the gear shift, the back door opened. Anna climbed in, but she wasn't the same. Her coat was soaked, dark stains spreading across the fabric. Her hands trembled as she clutched something in her lap, something wrapped in a rag. She leaned forward and whispered, "Drive." My heart pounded as I put the car in gear. "Are you okay? What happened?" "Just drive," she hissed. I couldn't help glancing at her through the rearview mirror. She wasn't looking out the window anymore. She was staring at me. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp, almost amused. Then my phone buzzed with a notification. I glanced at the screen. Breaking news: double homicide at local warehouse. My stomach dropped. I glanced at Anna in the mirror again. She was smiling now, a slow, unnerving smile. And in her lap, I could see what she'd been holding. A knife, the blade glinting under the faint cabin light. I slammed the brakes and jumped out of the car, leaving it running. I ran into the woods, heart pounding, lungs burning, until I couldn't run anymore. When I finally stopped and looked back, my car was gone. The next morning, the news showed a photo of my car, abandoned in a parking lot miles away. The back seat, covered in blood. The woman, nowhere to be found. To this day, I still hear her voice in my nightmares. Drive. Story 2. I've always considered myself pretty tough. Comes with the territory of being a journalist, especially one who dives into crime stories. So when I got the chance to interview David Calloway, the infamous serial killer known as the Collector, I didn't hesitate. It was the story of a lifetime. The prison was cold, sterile, and the guards didn't crack a smile. They didn't have to warn me about him. I'd read every detail of his crimes. He was meticulous, targeting young women, and leaving behind strange, cryptic clues at each scene. The police had solved all but one of his murders, the first one. I entered the interview room, and there he was, thin, unassuming, and disturbingly calm. He looked up at me with this small smirk, like he already knew me. "So," I began, forcing confidence into my voice, "you said you wanted to talk about the first murder." His smirk widened. "Oh yes, the one they never solved. It was special." As he spoke, describing the scene, my stomach started to churn. He described a cozy little apartment, wooden floors, bay windows, and a green couch. My heart sank as I realized he was describing my apartment. "No forced entry," he continued casually. "I just slipped in through the window. It was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking." I didn't interrupt. I couldn't. My throat was dry and my hands were clammy. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I left something behind," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "A clue. It's still there, waiting to be found." I ended the interview as fast as I could without raising suspicion. My mind was racing as I left the prison, barely hearing the guards' goodbyes. The drive home was a blur. Every detail he'd described matched my place perfectly, down to the crack in the bedroom doorframe. By the time I reached my apartment, I was shaking. I told myself it was a coincidence, that he was trying to mess with me, but I couldn't ignore the knot in my stomach. I searched every inch of my place, behind furniture, inside closets, under rugs. Nothing. Finally, I hesitated at the edge of my bed, then dropped to my knees. I lifted the bed skirt. There it was, a bloody handprint smeared on the underside of the bed frame, faded but unmistakable. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. I didn't sleep that night. I scrubbed the handprint clean, locked every door and window, and left all the lights on. But it wasn't enough. I felt like someone was watching me. The next morning I called the police. They searched my apartment, but there was no evidence tying Calloway to my place. No fingerprints, no signs of a break-in, nothing. But here's the thing. Last night, as I was cleaning, I noticed something new. A fresh handprint on the inside of my closet door. I don't know how it got there, but one thing's for sure. He didn't leave just one clue. And now, I don't think he ever stopped watching. Story 3. It started with a small, unmarked box sitting on my doorstep. I didn't think much of it. Maybe I ordered something and forgot. But when I opened it, I froze. Inside was a severed finger. Human. Pale. Stiff. And very real. I felt sick. A folded note sat beneath it. 4 words written in shaky red ink. "You're next. Be ready." I called the police immediately. They took the box, questioned me, and promised to investigate. But something about their demeanor made it clear they thought it was some prank. The packages didn't stop. A week later, I found a smaller box. This one had an ear wrapped in plastic. Same handwriting, same note. I didn't sleep that night. I kept every light on, double-checked the locks, and jumped at every sound. I even installed a security camera above the door. But the next package didn't come to the front door. It was waiting for me inside. When I got home from work, I found it sitting on my kitchen counter. My stomach dropped. How did it get in? I grabbed a knife from the drawer and tore the box open. Inside was a tooth and another note. "You're running out of time." I called the cops again. They swept the place, found no sign of a break-in, and suggested I stay somewhere else for a few days. I packed a bag and went to my brother's house. But the packages followed me there too. One night the doorbell rang. I checked the security feed and saw a man standing there in a black hoodie holding a box. He didn't ring the bell again, didn't knock, didn't move. He just stood there. I didn't open the door. I called the police instead, whispering into the phone. When they arrived, he was gone. All that was left was the box, sitting in the middle of the driveway. I couldn't resist opening it. This time, the box was empty except for a knife with my name engraved on the blade. The note beneath it read, "Last chance. Finish it." Finish what? I didn't understand. That night, I sat up, clutching the knife, my heart pounding with every creak and groan of the house. Around 3 a.m., the power cut out. I heard footsteps in the hallway. The footsteps stopped outside my door. I held my breath, gripping the knife so tightly my knuckles ached. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. It wasn't a man, it was me. Or someone who looked exactly like me, down to the clothes I'd been wearing earlier that day. I smiled and pointed to the knife in my hand. "Now you understand," she whispered. The cops found me the next morning, unconscious on the floor. The knife was gone. They asked if I'd been attacked, but I didn't know how to explain what had happened. When I got home from the hospital, there was one last package waiting for me. Inside was a mirror, and when I looked into it, my reflection didn't smile back. It just watched me.